Geopolitics of energy security, public-private partnership, competition and consumer choice, storage of energy and smart grid operations were some of the key focus areas of the retreat.
I'd like to hear from you how you rate India in its quest for energy security, what we have achieved and a lot of what we've missed perhaps.
We have to keep in mind that our relationship with an area of interest in energy security will need engagement in different forms. Now, when we speak of the Middle East, for instance, there is a crack developing in the Middle East, which is a very serious crack, and that's the Shia-Sunni conflict. We have to keep in mind that wherever we go, at least in some forms of energy, China will be competing with us. The footprint in our larger neighborhood, the footprint in Africa, China has a footprint there. Now there is a distinct advantage that India has had over China over the centuries, and we retain that advantage. Special connectivity, people-to-people connectivity that we have with Central Asia, that we have with Africa, we will retain. How we develop it, I think, is a big question. We shouldn't lose sight of that special connectivity only in looking at commercial deals. But important decisions will need to be taken at home, and important decisions will then have to be implemented in terms of keeping this connectivity alive.
For some countries like Germany and others, energy really perhaps is the fulcrum of the way foreign policy is being governed. How has it been so far for India, and is it time to perhaps change it?
India has to have a multi-dimensional approach. I think we will get nowhere if we limit ourselves to specialist energy security positions, because that's not been India's foreign policy. What we need really is a 21st century model of non-alignment, which doesn't mean that you disengage and remain aloof from everybody, but you have a special advantage in being able to deal with different countries. And I give you an example. The example is when nobody was talking to Iran, we were still continuing to buy oil from Iran. We made it clear to the United States of America that we have a special relationship with Iran. We continue to talk to Iran. We continue to deal with Iran. But of course, at the same time, we kept ourselves just short of the sanctions that the United States was imposing without accepting the sanctions. Now, only India could have done something of that nature. The same thing has been possible really between Israel and Palestine. India has a very special relationship. India seems to be the only country that various countries that don't talk to each other will continue to talk to India. We have kept ourselves in a relatively low profile in these matters, but I think it's important that we raise our profile.
So let's get some thoughts in from Mr. Prabhu as well.
Energy security is, in my opinion, one of the most critical issue for India. So what Salman was talking about is essentially in terms of getting liquid fuel, gas, oil from outside. Of course, we are not very happy with that, it looks like. So we are going to import almost 173 million tons of coal and now becoming 200 million tons of coal. In terms of Russia, I think it's a very important issue. Of course, China has already stolen over us, you said $400 billion, but that's only one part of China. They're now trying to link another part of China. But of course, this is something very interesting, is that we still don't know how much of that China is going to get it, what price, of course, that we don't know. We must accept that Chinese are going to do so many things. You know, you go to any African capital now, you have a big friendship hall, something hall, you buy by whatever name, this is all built by Chinese. Sports stadiums are built by the Chinese. Why so far away? Even an immediate neighbor in Sri Lanka, the Chinese have constructed their Bandaranaike International Center, huge complex with their money. So China is not just trying to secure oil fields by putting money into oil or gas fields, but they are trying to do so many things beyond that in terms of giving assistance, soft and hard support that they give to the country.
In terms of strategic strength, we have enormous strength with Russia. But again, Russia is getting into conflicts that we find difficult to support, present government has endorsed what we thought was a good idea, and that was to open up channels through Chabahar right across Iran, multimodal travel across Iran, pipelines getting into Central Asia, and then obviously ultimately into Russia. So I think the potential there is wonderful, and then we must keep it in mind that if somebody else doesn't buy from Russia, Russia needs a customer to sell its power to.
We had a model for a long time where we thought that we have a centralized generation, then transmitted generally, and then distributed locally. I think we look at this whole model itself by saying, is it not possible that we could have a distributed generation? So I think if you can change this model and try to bring in distributed generation in a significant way, that could actually reduce this energy poverty. So we'll be able to then provide electricity to a large number of people in the shortest possible time, and also in terms of using that sources of energy which are locally available. It is not that coal is available in east of India. Therefore, there was a good argument, and even continues to be a good argument in my opinion, to have peated power plants. If we do that, that would mean that probably our reliance on the import also will go down, because obviously we need large quantities of import for coal, for example, because we have a 3,000-4,000 coal-fired power plant. So we really need to find out ways of making sure that more coal production will come, more capacity addition could take place through that, and that if Coal India cannot handle a particular amount of quantity beyond that, that's the reason that we should try to bring in more players to work on that.
Just coming back for a moment to China. China is looking at India en route to the eastwards corridor, which will not just be for transit, which will not only just be for trade, but will also be for services, and certainly would be for things like an electrical grid and so on. We are already into exporting power to Bangladesh, obviously with intent that we can get something in return. There is just an incurred sort of a proposal for exporting power from Punjab when the power is available, or from Gujarat when power is available into Pakistan. I think it's absolutely important that the government gets proactive. But if the government is going to get proactive, I have a little caveat there. And I hope the CAG and CBI are listening, that they ask questions: why is the government proactive? What is the special interest that the government have to help people in this particular sector, or this particular businessman, or this particular... I think this also needs to be worked out more clearly. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be transparency, accountability, but I think it's important that we build in somewhere the idea of an honest mistake. Honest mistakes will be made when you expand your area of operation and you do things that you haven't done before. You'll make an honest mistake, and I think collectively as a nation we should recognize what an honest mistake is.
But I think we should have a very consistent, long-term, sustainable policy. This is the only solution in my opinion, because otherwise CAG and all the issues that we keep thinking about will automatically get addressed. So I think we should move towards the system of making policy a domain, a prerogative of the parliament. And therefore I think we really need to codify the roles of all the functionaries who are political functionaries, the ministers or ministers of state, or the bureaucrats. There has not been a proper codification and demarcation of roles and responsibilities.
One of the things that we haven't done in the country is a serious look at administrative reforms. I think that for a government that is not in a crisis, this should be one priority.
Well, thank you gentlemen so much. Fantastic session. Thanks, sir.
Thanks to its shale revolution, the US is becoming increasingly self-sufficient in energy supplies and could withdraw from the Middle East, which meets bulk of India's energy requirements and where geopolitical volatility is on the rise.
Without hydro, the country cannot progress. This provides a peaking load, whereas thermal provides only base load, and the widening gap in between thermal and hydro is increasing day by day. If hydro is not there, the fluctuations cannot be controlled, because hydro has an advantage of quickly starting and quickly stopping, and whatever requirement comes in the evening, the peak time, in the morning and evening peak time, that can be only met by hydro, and without hydro the country cannot survive.
I think the global situation on energy is going to change, given the fact that the United States and several other countries through shale are going to have huge amounts of gas. This is going to have a positive impact on us. We must remember that where we get 70% of our oil and gas, which is the Gulf region, there's huge instability. In Iraq, we've seen what's happened, what's happening in Libya. These are areas which we must focus much closer attention, not only for energy, but also for the welfare of Indian nationals. In these oil-rich countries, there are 6 million Indians living, and they send back $60 billion of cash every year.
Sensitization of the higher levels of judiciary on the complexities of the issue in the capital-intensive sector, such as infrastructure, telecom, power, oil and gas, and surface transport were discussed.
We must take up necessary governance reforms. It is extremely important also to build the institutional infrastructure before you get the physical infrastructure. Consumer voice is not about consumer protection. I think consumer voice should be about partnering with industry, partnering with the regulator, partnering with government, partnering with political parties and whatever. You partner together all those who are concerned. After all, who is not concerned about the development of this country? Who is not concerned about the infrastructure in this country? Who is not concerned about the elections in this country? I think that is something to be done. Now, who will take the leadership? I don't know. Market can do wonders for efficiency and accountability, both. Now, can you make markets work? I'm now currently working on a concept where can you have all delivery systems by creating the kind of markets instead of government delivery? Can you do that? In infrastructure, problems will be solved through partnership, through empowering not only the consumer, but all of us together on a single platform and through innovative use of markets.
Once I happened to meet Honorable Mr. Justice J.S. Verma, former Chief Justice of India, who was he was the architect of this collegium system. He also told me that, look here, now this system is failing. The government and the judiciary must think of some other better system. So far in the Indian judicial history, not a single judge has been removed. Before a judge is appointed, it is all the more necessary that he should be examined from all angles so as to see to it that the best is taken. But at times, that also fails. Now, Mr. Harry has already told us as to how a judgment can have adverse effect to the economy of the country. You are well aware of that judgment. I need not take the name of that particular judgment. But I would only give you my personal experience after that judgment. At least 3 big companies of 3 different countries came to me for my opinion, because according to them, they told me that one of the company had invested 16,000 crores, another company had invested 9,000 crores, and only with the same brush everyone was painted and their licenses were cancelled. When they were to come to India, they were shown that, look here, this is a golden goose, you invest, you will get this, you will get that. But now the question was, even they were not able to get the money that they had invested. Forget about the profits, etc. What had happened because of that? The result was that FDI fell. FDI fell to a great extent because the countries which were ready and willing to invest in India, they got a shock of their life. They decided, no, enough is enough, we are not going to invest. So my humble request to the honorable judges is that they must realize the ground realities. They must see as to how the judgment is going to affect the country. how the judgment is going to affect the economy of the country. Unless that is seen, it is not going to serve any purpose.
I think renewable energy is a very, very key component for us. The coastal states, and say Rajasthan, which have a potential for wind, or Madhya Pradesh, they go for huge capacities for wind installations. States like Gujarat, Rajasthan, Punjab or J&K, which have potential for solar, they can go in for solar. Punjab also has a huge potential for biomass. We, being an agriculturally rich state, we have a huge potential. Of course, there are certain technology issues that we are trying to grapple with. But I think overall, the renewable energy sector really needs to be mainstream, really needs to be given a big push, so that not only do we have green energy, clean energy for our generations, but also our energy mix looks much healthier and our dependence on fossil fuels is reduced.
As share of renewable power increases in country's electricity mix, India needs to deploy smart grid technology in transmission and distribution network to overcome grid fluctuations.
It's really important to consider timing here, because you know that hydro projects are going to take years, if not decades, and you know in the event of nuclear, it would obviously take a very long time, and large-scale thermal and fuel issues, and all of those things are on different scales, and so different technologies and different solutions have the ability to deal with things in different time periods. And it's important in the evolution of a smart grid roadmap to think about those things that can be done quickly in the 0 to 3 to 5 year range, in the 5 to 10 year range, in the 10 to 15 year range, and what goes with that. California alone, the state, over the last 15 years, has spent a little over $1.5 billion doing demand response programs to create over 4,000 megawatts of demand that the independent system operator of California can use exactly how much in their forward forecast? Zero. Not dispatchable, not two-way verifiable, can't see it, can't use it. Electricity is the one thing, and investing in the people that touch the consumer, the grid, has to be a viable thing to do. Yes, roads are important, yes, all these other things are important, but electricity is the only thing in the history of mankind that ties to the health and welfare of an entire nation. We've been able to create a platform that allows the utility, instead of seeing all of this as a threat, a customer getting a generator, a customer getting a photovoltaic panel, any type of photovoltaic or small-scale wind or anything else, it creates a platform by which now they can interact with it positively to grid through a business model and a capability to grid that works for everybody involved in the transaction. And it's crucial that the regulator, the utility, and the consumer come back together and not fragment apart in this conversation, because customers are investing in demand-side generation and technologies and reliability and things to keep them whole. And those things can be an important part for India's future in the next 5 to 10 years, while the rest of the policy for huge infrastructure and hydro and thermal and nuclear, all those things are being worked out and the base loads created. In the next 5 years, India has the capability of getting 20 to 30,000 megawatts of dynamic demand response fully enabled in a 5-year period that can help manage the grid in a very short amount of time.
And we all know through the smart grid roadmap, you want to go from 230 gigawatts to 900 gigawatts of power in X number of years. That's a tremendous goal to go for. Part of the smart grid roadmap actually says that by 2023 you actually want 130 million smart meters installed. 130 million. How many today? Very few. Remove for the distribution companies the constraints that they're on at the moment, make it open-ended, to actually let them make the decision that they're not penalised by implementing smart metering. I then asked the national and state governments to consider, as the European Union did for Ireland, and that's how they got to the Celtic Tiger explosion in Ireland with the grants from the EU, but to give grants to the distribution companies, the utilities, the power industry, to make the smart grids happen, because you're going to recover that money in a very short space of time by getting rid of the losses and getting rid of the theft that occurs today. Something then that I think that the regulators can do and stipulate right from Monday when you go back to the offices, and that is every single static tender that comes out for static meters, tenders for static meters, instead of going for static meters, have 25% of those tenders put out for smart metering. That's a decision that people in this room can make to push this forward. to make it happen. And I know that the meter manufacturers in India have got really a powerful lobby, but I've also got a solution about the cost. We at Sion have actually developed a low-cost, standardised retrofit design for a meter. And actually, you can get this meter manufactured and made here in India, so it creates more jobs. And this low-cost meter will only cost 1,200 rupees. So 1,200 rupees to me is affordable to get a smart meter installed with a remote disconnect. Unlike some of the costs that I've seen today, people are asking for 8,000 rupees for a smart meter. We as Sion have also got a retrofit product that sits alongside existing meters, and it will make those existing meters smart. And that can happen, and remotely you'll be able to see and control and measure the energy that's going out. Once you've got that, the low demand that Chris talked about, you can then manage with the consumer two-way communication and encourage them to use the washing machine and the fridge in the afternoon or whenever, and not use it at peak times. So you really need smart metering and smart grid to make it happen in terms of the demand and share that load across the piece.
When you bring maturity in a sector like power, when you bring, for instance, the kind of better networking, better relationship between the operators and players and regulators, on the one hand, and the government on the other. So what happened? There is a better connect between the policymakers, regulators, and companies and consumers. So this eventually leads to what? This leads to better flow of electricity. This leads to better opportunities for the companies, and eventually it boils down to one thing, that power available 24/7 to you at very affordable price.